appreciate your time today. We are happy to talk to you to talk about streamlining your entire AP processes. We're here with Core Associates and AvidXchange talking about AvidXchange Pay. We've got Leanne from Core Associates and Jim to speak with us today. Take it away, Jim.
All righty. Thank you so much, Mandy. And let's take a look at our agenda. Today here we are going to focus on accounts payable, end-to-end purchase-to-pay solutions. I thought we'd start back by taking a look at some of the timelines and trends in accounts payable technology. We'll face some of the challenges that the construction industry particularly faces in AP. They're unique. We're going to talk about the end-to-end partnership between Core Associates, ETHOSystems, and AvidXchange, and how we've tried to create an integrated end-to-end solution for a good purchase-to-pay concept. We'll take a deep dive look at TimberScan for the purchasing and invoice routing and approval front end part of it. And we'll take a deep dive look at AvidXchange on the back end and how we complete the loop by executing payments on approved invoices at the time funds are ready for release. So we are living in a digital world today. I don't think anyone would argue with that. I'm amazed by the tests that we were put through here just in this recent Q2 of 2020. Who would have thought that we would have been put to this test of transitioning many businesses, many workers, as well as many students in the educational systems at all level to a work from home or educate from home environment. And it really put three areas of our digital preparedness to the test. One is just digital access. Do we have access to the information we need? And a part of that is connectivity. How easy and secure was it to connect for us from different locations? Last but not least was the content. Was the content appropriate to be delivered in the digital environments that we were in, be it on our laptops, be it on our phones, and those types of things? So we've got some lessons learned there, and we've got some opportunities for preparedness for the future. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. So let's get a little feedback from the audience. We've got quite a number of people registered here. So let's launch this poll, Mandy, there, and just listen where our audience is today.
Yeah, so you should be seeing a poll on your screen, really just looking to find out what your current setup is for work. Like Jim mentioned, where are you today?
As we reopen the economy, we do hope many people are making it back to their work, but let's just take a look at what we got here. I know I'm coming to you today from my home office right outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, where Avid is located, but starting to transition back to work in our Charlotte headquarters here actually this week.
Maybe just give it another second. Sure.
And the live results are reflecting 57% are working out of their home office currently.
Interesting. All righty, let's take a little walk down memory lane if we can here. I hope you find this interesting. I won't belabor the points, but I think you'll see how this sort of ties together on the kind of what I'll say is the slow start, but now a rapid adoption of technology as it applies to accounts payable. So let's go all the way back a little over 100 years, 1914. Interesting development then. That was the year that the first check writing machine was developed. And this check writing machine was positioned by those from the U.S. Treasury as not so much of a machine, but I'm going to quote a few things. It was called a high-tech defense weapon more than a piece of office equipment. And what this machine did was it did two things. It embossed, if you will, by kind of shredding and embedding ink into both the dollar numeric amount of the check that was the check was being written for, and then also the proof or the longhand written out word dollar amount of the check. And someone from the Treasury Department at that time, quote, called it one of the gravest and most widespread of all menaces against our nation's business, check forgery. So in other words, it was seen as a solution to the most menacing problem of business in that day, and that was altering checks. Now, what's interesting to me about that, fast forward to today, regardless of what we hear and read about cybersecurity and cyber breaches and those types of things, still yet today in 2020, over 100 years later, most payment fraud that occurs in B2B relationships today involve a paper check. So again, a majority of fraud as it pertains to payment still involves a paper check. So I think it's kind of interesting in how that's developed. So a couple key points. In 58 was when Bank of America released the first credit card. And this offered two things. It offered credit, but also offered convenience to its customers. Some of you on the line may remember that. What it did not do was eliminate paper. In fact, it introduced a threefold piece of paper. The card was slid in a machine to make a carbon imprint on three copies, one for the customer, one for the merchant, and then one to be used as a transmittal for settlement of the payment between the customer and the merchant themselves. And it wasn't until about 16 years later that credit card adoption eliminated the paper by introducing the terminals that we take for granted today that are point to point and at point of sale for credit card processing. About 20 years later, then we start seeing this co-development of both electronic commerce from a B2B perspective, the buying and selling or exchange of goods and services with companies most notoriously being Amazon, coupled with this digital payment platform. One was interdependent upon the other. Now we're starting to see a more rapid involvement both at the personal level and at the business level of different what we call payment modalities. PayPal, for example, extended credit card processing without all the expense of a terminal. I'll point out on AvidXchange, while we started out over 20 years ago, it was only 2012 that we got into the payment business. Yet I just checked the numbers before this webinar, and so far year to date since January 1st, we've processed 6.8 million individual payment transactions for $15.9 billion of payments. So again, it's just sort of an example of how companies like ours and others have accelerated this payment curve. And now in 2020, we're doing a much better job of integrating these purchase to pay techniques, including digital payments, in an integrated fashion with the current ERP systems or the construction accounting or real estate management systems that are out there. So keep some of those thoughts in mind as we progress through our presentation. You're going to see some things change and some things don't. So as we'll see from the slide advances here, we position that the world of accounts payable is rapidly changing, and it is, yet some of the adoption is actually relatively slow. And that's pointed out that even with all the advances in electronic payments, for example, still between 70 and 80% of all payments made today still involve a paper check. And we're starting to question ourselves, is that really needed? Many countries, particularly in Europe, the trend is reversed and have gotten rid of most of the paper. The banks don't need it. A paper check today is nothing more than a little precursor to a digital record. What we've not done a very good job of in the industry, however, is using technology to eke out cost savings. And that's really what technology in business needs to do. It needs to get some of the heavy lifting, some of the non-value added things out of the process so we can work on highest and best use of our time. And we do spend our time quite a bit in accounts payable. About 50% of accounts payable clerks' time is really spent processing and chasing paper. So while B2B commerce is really rapidly advancing and we're in a very steep curve on that, there is a concern that the accounts payable portion or the accounts payable department can be left behind. We're going to talk about ways to solve that today. So all verticals have their challenges in electronic payments. Certainly healthcare has got its HIPAA challenges, real estate's got its decentralization and those types of things. But if we think about construction, nothing is more notorious than the challenges a contractor faces. So first of all, let's talk about invoice intaking. A, there's no standardization there in the construction industry, and B, our progress billings or the AIA formats are about as complicated as the 1040 tax return. All of the invoices require quite a bit of operational approval before we even get to the release of funds area. So let's go ahead and bring up in the sake of time all 5 of these points so you can be pondering those. So one of the first challenges we have then is without the standardization, it makes data capture sometimes challenging and a little unique. We're not able to automate that to the degree that we'd like to. So it still becomes a manual process. What we've been able to do, however, is provide technology that makes that data capturing at least a one place, one time, and integrating that throughout the other systems that are affected. We have at least a two-way or three-way match consideration in the construction industry. Two-way being matching up the invoice with the purchase order, and the matches can be on total dollar amounts, or the matches could be on unit prices, or those types of things. And many people like the discipline of a three-way match, which is then again matching up the receipt, both data, the quantity received, as well as maybe the shipping ticket or some verification of the receipt, to really tie that in to make sure that the products we ordered were delivered and delivered in good working condition, or the services were provided as per the purchase order or the subcontract. Throughout this whole process, we've got not only operational approvals by project managers or warehouse people, but also the compliance approvals. Are the workers' comp insurance requirements in place? The lien waiver process and getting a good cadence around that. There's any subcontractor certified payrolls if those are required. Any compliances that the owner puts upon us or the government might put upon us for approvals all seem to get shored up, if you will, at the time of accounts payable through the payment. And last but not least is reporting. So we've got to file this stuff, we've got to archive this stuff, and that is really where the manual process pretty much breaks, because we don't know what the reporting needs are going to be. It could be a draw request. It could be a claim that we need to go back and pull into invoicing purchase to pay solutions for support of the claim, those types of things. But that is, reporting is certainly an area where we're sort of tied up in a knot if we don't have automation. So think about those things in your business, and let's look at this. So just to put some numbers on this, you see a lot of different reports, but it is really simple to say that from an invoice to pay for solution, on the low end, we're looking at about $8, at the high end, about 12, a little over $11 to process invoice to pay transactions. And this is both hard cost and soft cost associated. It's something we don't think about. We say, well, that's just the way we do it. It's the way it's already done. But you're going to see that from a payment selection point of view, particularly, you're going to be able to eke out some savings, not only to get that below $1 per payment, but you're also going to be introduced to some ways to see those payments generate revenue for your business. So let's talk a little bit about the partnership here that Ethos has brought together between TimberScan and AvidXchange. And we'll go into this a little more deeply, but simply stated, think of TimberScan, our partners here at Core Associates, being able to help you with the front end piece from purchasing through the invoice routing and approval, integration with your accounting system, and then the AvidXchange partnership coming in to close the loop, to take that approved invoice into a release of funds mode and provide you a more efficient way of executing the payment. What you'll see at the end of this is a good trail of purchase to pay all the way through the system. So just a little bit about AvidXchange. As I mentioned earlier, we're headquartered here in Charlotte, North Carolina. We're a 20-year-old company, although we still feel like have the energy and the growth numbers of a startup. We currently have about 1,400 employees across 7 offices here in the United States. Our secret sauce really is that number there in the middle bullet. We have 600,000 plus suppliers in our supplier network. That means 2 things. These are vendors that we have paid at least one time, and we know their preferred method of payment. So we operate under a process of vendor choice. Someone always asks, how do you pay the vendors in your network on my behalf? And the answer is we pay them any way they want to be paid. Again, last year we processed a little over 12 million in payments, and we've got a lot of notoriety here in terms of both software and technology and services advancement. So we're both a software and a service organization that you'll see more of as we explain the details. And now a little bit about Core Associates. Leanne, I think you're going to speak to that.
Yes, thank you, Jim. Hi, everyone. Yeah, a little background on Core Associates. We were founded in 2008, but we've actually been providing automated solutions since 2004, when the first version of TimberScan for accounts payable automation was released. We have over 70 employees today, and we're a completely virtual company. So virtual has been our reality since day one. Our focus and our expertise are identifying time-consuming and manual processes, specifically around, the construction and real estate industries, and then developing tools to be able to automate those processes. The solutions that we develop, they're designed to eliminate paper, streamline your processes, and just overall make users more efficient and productive. For us, being a virtual company, I think has really emphasized the need and also the value of eliminating paper-based processes. We have a number of applications that we developed in-house, and then we also integrate with a number of industry-leading solutions like AvidPay. So together, Core Associates and AvidXchange, we can offer a fully connected end-to-end purchase-to-pay experience. So we're going to take a look at how that works. Now, if we start over here on the left, there's essentially 4 steps in the process, and all of these can be done without touching any paper. Purchase orders, requisitions, your receiving tickets, they can all be created electronically using what we call core cloud systems. Once the purchase orders, they're created, they get synced with compatible ERP systems, and then they get sent into TimberScan or AcumaticScan as what we call supporting documents. So then you can manage the approval process and do your 3-way match when the invoice hits your door. TimberScan and AcumaticScan, it can also serve as your central repository to be able to manage all of your invoices and your documents. You can capture, route invoices and documents for approval within the system. And then once they're approved, they flow into Sage or Acumatica without rekeying any data. So here we are in step 3, and we haven't touched a piece of paper. Now, once you're ready to pay those invoices, that's where Avid comes into play. And Jim's going to talk about that a bit later in the presentation. But essentially, you can leverage the power and the flexibility of the AvidPay network to be able to make those payments electronically, and that whole process seamlessly integrates with your ERP system. All right, this here is a schematic of the AP routing and approval process. I'd like to walk through this just so you can get a nice visual of what the flow looks like. And then we're going to head into TimberScan and we'll walk through a brief demonstration of how the software works. If we start over here on the left-hand side, you can think about it of the time an invoice is going to come into TimberScan. And there's a few ways to get invoices in the system. You can always drag and drop them individually, or using our email monitoring tool. A lot of companies have went to that concept of a centralized inbox where they're having all of their vendors or subcontractors send those invoices. The monitoring tool will watch that email address, and it will take just the attachments from those emails and move them to a network folder that you specify. So then TimberScan just browses out to that network folder, and we can grab all of those invoices at one time and bring them into the system automatically. Now, from a data entry standpoint, once those invoices are in the system, the key thing really to point out here is if you use, TimberScan or AcumaticScan, your data entry would be done within our system, not within the ERP. And we link to your file maintenances. So within TimberScan or AScan, we have access to all of your vendors and your jobs and your cost codes, GL accounts and the like. From the Sage standpoint, we replicate the Sage AP data entry grid within our system. So that's really nice because it makes it very easy for users to come up to speed on our system. And then we also offer OCR, or optical character recognition technology. And that allows us to read the text on those invoices as they're coming into the system electronically. And then we can convert that text into data and use that to populate the data entry. Right, so if you're using the OCR technology and also commitments within the ERP system, you can have most of that data entry done for you automatically. The system's then going to route those invoices out for approval automatically. Right, so you define how you want those business rules to work. The system then executes those for you, sends the approvers notifications letting them know they have invoices that need to be approved. And the other really nice thing is that those approvers, they don't have to come into an office. They can approve them remotely on the go using a smartphone or a tablet. We have the final review step, and that's just an opportunity to have a final check on things before those invoices get sent over to the ERP system. As you're going through the routing and approval, you're attaching supporting documents, whether it's purchase orders, receiving tickets, insurance documents, W-9s, whatever you want to collect and manage. And then you're building essentially a packet of information that's then not only available within TimberScan, but also gets sent over to Sage. Once your invoices are in the ERP system, that's where Avid comes into play. Your process for selecting those invoices for payment, that's going to remain in the ERP. And then using one of the Avid solutions, you can generate those payments electronically. From within TimberScan, once those payments are made, we have a process to then attach the payment record to that invoice packet that I mentioned. So then you have everything all together in one place for easy access, right from the time you get the invoice in the door over here in step 1 through to you make that payment over here in step 5. Okay, we're going to go ahead and take a look at TimberScan. So this is the main screen of TimberScan. You can see the system has these nice big bright buttons, very easy to navigate, very user-friendly. We did that intentionally, wanted to really make things efficient, eliminate the number of clicks. The first step in the process, as I mentioned, is to acquire invoices. So I'm going to keep this fairly high level for today in the interest of time. And what we're looking at here, this is TimberScan 300, which integrates with Sage 300 CRE, but we also have solutions for Sage 100 Contractor and Acumatica. These here are just some invoices that were in my inbox. So I'm just going to drag and drop those into the system here. Now, if you use the email monitoring that I mentioned, we have to tell the system what it is we're acquiring. In this case, we have invoices, but we would use the open file button, and that would allow us to just browse out to the network folder wherever you're having those invoices be sent, and you can highlight, all of them or pick and choose. And once you hit open, it's going to bring all of those invoices into TimberScan. Now at this step, you're just doing some sorting and ordering of your pages, doing some quality control on the document. We also have a tool called Acquire Automation, and that would essentially enable you to eliminate this step altogether. It will split your pages for you automatically, bypass the acquire step, and move those invoices right into data entry for you. In the manual process here, you're going to sort and order your pages. In this case, if you need to split it, this one document is 2 pages here, but it's actually 2 separate invoices. If I look at each one, I have invoice 393 and I have invoice 394. So I would just click on the second page and either say mark as a new invoice or just right click and say insert break. Now I have 3 separate invoices. You have a number of annotation options over here. If you need to despeckle, rotate, deskew, you would do that here. Once everything is ready to go, you just hit the process button, and then TimberScan is going to go ahead and route out this entire batch of invoices to the data entry group that you've assigned here. Once you've acquired those invoices and they're in TimberScan, from a data entry standpoint, there's a couple of ways to do your data entry. You can go in the whole batch at one time, or you can look in this card view and you can just browse through if you're trying to get one particular invoice. So I'm going to look at this H&D supply here as an example. You'll see I'm getting this compliance warning because we have a tight integration with Sage. We replicate the data entry grid from within Sage. You'll see that here. You'll get warning messages within TimberScan, similar to what you would see in Sage. And we also can use your function key. So your F4 lookups and everything will work within here as well. Now for H&D Supply Company, we have an OCR template on file for these guys. So you'll notice down here in the data entry grid, all of my header level information came in automatically for me. And then I had some line item detail default as well. We link to those Sage commitment records. So in here, you can type it in, use your function keys, or just use this list and it's going to show any open commitments for that vendor. So in this case here, I just have one. It's a multi-line commitment, so you could select them all or just pick and choose certain line items. And then you'll notice all of that information came in automatically. So you can see if you use the OCR, you get all your header level information done. You can have your commitment lines brought in, essentially having all the heavy lifting done for you. Over here on the right, you have commitment level summary details, so you would know if you exceeded the commitment, and then you can get into the detail view here as well. The other thing I want to point out is the supporting documents button. If you're using the Core Cloud application and having those purchase orders created from Core Cloud and you're receiving tickets, they'll come into TimberScan. When you click on the supporting documents button, you would attach the purchase order and the receiving ticket to the invoice and then they become pages on the invoice, and that's when you're starting to build that packet of information that I mentioned. Right. And then based on your workflow rules, the system, once you're done with your entry, it's going to go ahead and route it out for approval. Could be based on job, or maybe a vendor, or a job cost code combination, invoice type as an example, a department. It can go to multiple levels of approval. You can have dollar thresholds built into those approvals. So very flexible. Now, once your approval is, once your data entry is done, then we get into the approval side. Now I'm just going to show TimberScan Go here. This is our mobile invoice approval. All you need is access to the internet and a browser here. And when I log as an approver, if you have a bunch of invoices, you can narrow it down by invoice date, job number, vendor as an example. You can do some keyword searches. And from this view, you can just drill into the invoice and you can see all of the notes relating to that invoice. You could see any supporting documents, multiple pages. You could put new annotations on here if you wanted, and certainly if anyone before you had put them on, you'd see them here as well. You got your header level detail over on the right, and these are all your functions across the top. You can download it and email it to someone. You could put it on hold. You could route it. You could reject it. You can add a new note, view existing notes, approve it, or if you want to change those distributions, maybe you need to change the cost code. This is a lookup into Sage. Right? You also have tooltips in here, so those approvers can see budget information relating to the cost code. They can link to the job cost inquiry. So this shows all invoices for the project, and you can view the images from here as well. You can add new distribution lines, so if maybe you wanted to split the distribution across multiple codes. And because this is what we call a responsive user interface, you can run this and it optimizes and resizes based on the device you're on. So this is what it would look like on an iPhone X as an example, but it works with Android as well. So in this view, slightly different layout and look and feel of the application, but you can still get to those same features and functions. All right, so that's the approval process. Now, moving on, once those invoices are approved, we have that final review step that I mentioned. And whoever's going to be responsible for this, they would just come in here. This is where they do their final check. They'd verify supporting documentations are here. Maybe they look at tax information, make sure the coding's been done. Over here, they can see that summary level commitment information as well. Once they're happy with everything, they would just hit this queue for export button. And then it gets sent to the export queue. And then whoever runs the export, it's a one-step process. So those invoices will get exported over to Sage. And when they go over to Sage, they go over as unposted invoices. There's not another process that you need to run on the Sage side. Now, once those invoices are in Sage and you go ahead and make those payments, you can come back into TimberScan here, and we have this process to attach those check images, right? So the Avid Create a Check engine will create a file. You browse out here, you would grab that payment file, put your starting bank account number in and your check number, and you can see here we have the integration with Avid. And TimberScan's going to look to that payment file that was created by the Avid Create a Check engine, and it's going to ripple through there and attach all of those payment records, and you'd see them here in the window down here on the bottom, and attach them to all of the invoices. So if you just cut 50 payments, then TimberScan will ripple through all of those 50 payments, and if one payment paid 10 invoices, it's going to attach that payment record to all of those 10 invoices for you. And then from the Sage standpoint, or the ERP, I'm just going to show Sage here as an example. And if we look at the invoice register, all right, if you were using Sage 100 Contractor, Acumatica, it would be the same thing. When you come over into the ERP and you click on the invoice, you're going to see that entire packet of information. The invoice with the annotations, the system, TimberScan's building this routing and approval page so you can see when it was received, who did the data entry, when it was approved, who did that final review step, when it was posted. supporting documents, and then your payment record. All right, so you have that visibility in both TimberScan as well as the ERP system, which is really nice. We also have a number of reports and inquiries. I'm not going to go into those today, just in the interest of time, but those are really powerful as well, really great for providing backup for T&M cost plus projects or your loan draws. You can generate those literally in a matter of seconds. All right, so I'm going to hop out of the application and we'll go back into PowerPoint. Okay. All right. Well, before I turn it back to Jim, just a couple of final comments there that I wanted to say. Just wanted to point out, I mentioned the Core Cloud Systems mobile purchasing and receiving application. But in addition to that, we have a number of applications within our Core Cloud family. One of them is our eForms tool. So you can essentially take any piece of paper and create a mobile form out of that, and you can route those around for approval. We also have an expense reporting and credit card reconciliation application, as well as a mobile time entry solution. If you want to learn more about any of those applications, you can just visit our website. It's www.core-assoc.com and go to the resources tab. You can also check us out on YouTube, or if you want a one-on-one demonstration, I know I went through that pretty quickly today, please reach out to your representative at ETHOSystems, or you can request an online demonstration from our website as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jim.
All right. Thank you so much, Leanne. And I think we've got another poll question. As we transition into payments here, we'd like to get you back involved. So just pick a button and tell us about how many monthly payments you estimate you're making now, so we know kind of what the audience is here that we're talking with. So if you don't mind, just click that or remain confidential. Once we get the results in there, Mandy, we'll move on and shift to the payment execution side of this.
And a little live results on the poll as it's happening right now. 67% are in the 501 to 1,000 payments per month, with the remaining, just changed to 67. 17% are 251 to 500, and 17% is 0 to 100 per month.
All righty. Well, that's good. So we've got some companies out there that are doing over 500 payments, and some that are more in the 100 range. Probably about 100 payments a month are where you can start really getting some good productivity lists and some good return on investments. But there's no hard and fast rules on that. And everything's transactionally based. So it's just sort of a pay-as-you-go plan on the payment execution. So we're going to look a little more closely at how this works on payment execution here. And you're going to hear us talk about our Avid Create a Check product. So just a little history there. Create a Check was a product that was invented a little over 20 years ago that really had its big slice the bread moment in technology was with the advent of laser printers. A company called Piracle out in Salt Lake City, Utah, figured out how to print both the check data and the check image itself at the same time, or what we call plain paper checks, which was a tremendous productivity boost in the check writing process, both in terms of productivity and eliminating the cost of having to purchase pre-printed checks. It was also a very high security measure because you didn't have blank checks just lying around the office. Many of you on the call today may own and use the Create a Check product. In 2015, AvidXchange bought the company Piracle. So now we own that technology called Create a Check, and we've evolved it, as you'll see, to facilitate electronic payments as well. But similar to a flowchart diagram that Leanne went over, I just want to reorient you in what we mean by purchase to pay and how really three systems well integrated work together. So if you just read this left to right, we start with a purchase order. We get an invoice in out of that. We have an invoice application that codes it and routes it and approves it and those types of things. Now, the bar there indicates your accounting system. So simply think of it this way. Invoices integrate into your accounting system. Payment selection originates from and is exported out of your accounting system into the pay services mode. So invoices in, payments done like you're doing them today, and export out. Now, in the next slide, we'll pick up there in a little bit more detail. So once again, your payments are going to originate in your accounting system just like they do today. So if you go in and make your payment selection, just as you would prepare any check run, it is done precisely how you are doing it today. The payment data is then put into a batch, and the accounting system now can send the payments to a printer to be printed, or alternatively, that whole payment batch can be sent to the AvidPay network. So that batch file comes across automatically. When we receive that batch, we debit your checking account, the operating account that's associated with the transaction. So that means you can actually have multiple operating accounts, multiple checking accounts associated with that transaction. We debit the proper amount for the exact amount of the payment out of your operating account. And then we start our vendor payments on your behalf. We start paying your vendors in any one of the three methods that they choose. And that is, they can be paid with a virtual card or a credit card if they have a merchant account and prefer to receive payments that way. They can be paid with what's called AvidPay Direct, which is an ACH fulfillment that goes directly into their bank account, but with a rich remittance advice that is associated with it. That is to say, even though they're getting paid electronically in both of these first two methods, they also get emailed to them what is the moral equivalent of a check stub that shows the vendor how to apply a payment. So think of that, for example, if one payment covered three invoices and two of them were paid in full and one was partially paid, how would your vendor know that if all that happened was the money showing up in their bank account? It would be like, thanks for the money. What was it for? I've got a receivables I've got to relieve, and tell me about this partial payment. So all of that rich remittance advice gets communicated to them, not only in the form of if they receive a paper check, but also if they receive electronic payment. So last but not least, if we still have vendors that prefer to receive a paper check, we will cut them a paper check. And then your reconciliation back on your accounting side and on your bank accounts looks very similar to what it does today, or how it looks today, except there will be very few outstanding or floating items because of the draft. But because we draft your account payment by payment, there's a one-to-one reconciliation between the draft and the check that you initiated in the payment file. This will make more sense as I go through the presentation here. So now, going back to your accounting system, you have made your payment selections. You're ready to quote unquote print checks. So step one, because this is a payment engine and security is paramount, we're going to ask that authorized user to log in to their create a check. Once they do that, you're going to have some drop-down options. This is at the time of printing checks, if you will. One of the options is you can still print checks locally as you do today. And you will always need to print some checks locally. Some vendors may want to stop by. You maybe need to cut a check on demand or something like that. So you don't lose any of that capability. But for optimization, you're going to want to send as many payments through the AvidPay network as possible. And that becomes the drop down that's highlighted there. So we're using if you want to think of it this way, we're using like a virtual printer hub to direct payments either to a printer or to the AvidPay network. And then once you're there, you can authenticate yourself on the AvidPay network, as you'll see on the next screen. So after that payment file has been transmitted to the AvidPay network, and it can contain one payment, it can contain 1,000 payments, makes no difference. When that batch file comes across, you log into the AvidPay network simply to check your payment statuses. So after you sign in here, the next screen will appear. Now let's assume that payment batch that you sent across just had 3 simple payments in it for explanation purposes. So the payment batch is what's highlighted in blue there. So when you click on that payment batch in the AvidPay network on the left-hand side, then you see the details of each and every payment. On the right-hand side, payment by payment. So let's walk across this. You see what bank account it came from, and you see the check number that your accounting system issued. In other words, it's very important that the accounting system thinks it made the payment because a lot of things happen in an accounting system when payments are made. They're all designed and built around that payment processing still existing within the system. And that check number that the accounting system assigns becomes a voucher number throughout the electronic payment network that is always associated with that payment record. So as you read the first line across, you see that check number that the accounting system, 180514, was actually paid with a virtual credit card in the amount of $585. The next one was paid with an ACH. And the third one was paid by AvidXchange cutting them a paper check. Now, if we click to the next slide, you can drill down to any one of those payments. And you see, for example, that payment there, you see that its current status is it is processing. It has not yet cleared, but it has been sent. So that's the current status of that. Now, if you'd like to see the payment detail on how that payment was made, you can click again on that invoice image, and you will literally see one of two things. Either A, the image of the paper check that AvidXchange sent on your behalf. Your company's name will be on it, so your vendor will have clear visibility that that payment is from your business. And I don't show it here, but you will see both the front and the back, or the endorsed back image of the paper check, and that's depicted on the left-hand side of this screen. You might ask, well, what do I see as proof of payment if the payment is made electronically, either via ACH or credit card payment? And what you see on the right is the standard proof of payment for an electronic payment. That one-time use card is printed there, and the transactional dates, times, and merchant accounts, all necessary information to trace the electronic payment is there. So if you're doing a cost plus job or ever need to come up with proof of payment, this is an industry accepted way of proof of payment for payments that were made electronically. So all of this, as Leanne mentioned within TimberScan, all of this is device responsive. This is a complete cloud-based system, and it can be accessed from anywhere, any place, anytime. That means when we say that it's device responsive or has device recognition, that means the software knows if you're accessing it over a mobile phone, and it will reformat properly. Same with an iPad. If it's got more screen space to realize, it'll optimize the screen. And likewise for desktops and laptops. So the device recognition makes it truly usable from a 24/7 access from anywhere standpoint. Let's talk a little bit about the payment timeline here, because this is always of interest to everyone. So let's think of this in a 3-day turnaround. First of all, let's define day one as the time that you transmit a batch of payments to the AvidPay network. As long as you do that before 3 p.m. Eastern, we consider that day one. So if you get us the file before 3 o'clock on the East Coast, the payment process will begin. What happens is we will draft the funds from your operating account that evening or after 3 o'clock, and we will begin preparing all forms of payment execution for the day two payment. Now, day two, all of your electronic payments are fulfilled, if you will. We will send out the ACH notices, and we will send out the credit card redemptions for the vendors with their merchant accounts will be able to process and receive their money. If a paper check is to be issued, that paper check will be issued and sent day two. So all checks go out the next day, assuming we get them by 3 o'clock. In fact, all payments go out. But the beauty of electronic payment and the why behind vendors wanting to receive payments electronically is that if they do, they will have their money on day three. Now, as I mentioned, we have over 600,000 vendors that we pay on a routine basis. I bet you'll find it interesting that current state, 44% of those vendors choose, their vendor choice, choose to receive payments electronically. And this is the why. They're not going to the bank. They're not waiting on check float and those types of things. They're not waiting on the mail, those types of interruptions. They have access to their funds. There's no deposit they need to make, and they've got the remittance information to relieve the accounts receivable that the payment is for. So we talked a little bit, and I want to touch on accounts payable as a profit center for your business. So not only can we eliminate hard cost out of your business, for example, we charge 89 cents per payment to make a payment. And the ROI on that gets pretty simple given the cost of a postage stamp is what, 55 cents now for a first class stamp. We hadn't even gotten to the price of an envelope yet. There is no check involved on your part. So the hard cost savings alone are justified, not to mention the increase in productivity that you will see. You're going to find that from a productivity standpoint, you're probably going to be able to increase your scale in payment volume, should your business grow at this rate, 2 to 3x without having to add additional accounts payable staff. and you'll find that the staff you do have, much of their time can be repurposed to a higher and better use. But in addition to productivity, which is the number one reason for electronic payments and by far the biggest gain to your business, you're going to be introduced to the concept of rebates. And that is to say that any vendor that has a merchant account, that is to say that they're enabled to receive credit card payments, AvidXchange shares in that interchange fee, which is the convenience fee, if you will, for taking payments electronically. And we in turn share a portion of that back with you, the buyer customer. And so we put up just a couple of little profiles there. It all has to do with the number of payments that you make and the payments that are made electronically. So you'll see there, here's a customer, general contractor making 250 monthly payments, annual spend 600 million. This customer with a 38% electronic payment adoption was able to earn $3,800 of rebates and about a $2,100 hard cost supply savings just in 1 year. And that was just in the first year, including the cost of the AvidXchange payment systems. So another example with a higher development, here's lower payments, a lower spend, but a higher electronic payment adoption. So again, you're seeing these numbers in the 3,500 range just on 250 to 300 monthly payments. So with the next slide, it sort of summarizes this. You're going to see that this is an interesting model because not only after the productivity savings, you're going to actually be purchasing something, if you will, that's going to pay for itself, probably with an additional excess rebate refund that will help you offset your annual ownership or your initial purchase cost of the timber scan. And we're able to do a vendor analysis here for you. If you'll work with us on getting us the vendor data, we can help you do those extractions, that we will match your vendors against our network and get you not only an accurate number for what you could expect for rebates, but actually a guaranteed number, a guaranteed minimum for the term of your agreement, that regardless of what your rebates work out to, we will guarantee you a minimum rebate amount. And I bet you'll find that that will more than cover the cost of the system and contribute to the helping you offset some of the cost of your ongoing maintenance and support with TimberScan as well. So with that, we're sort of at the top of the hour here, and I want to just summarize with 5 good takeaway points as you ponder an AP automation plan for your business. As we talk to customers, here's 5 good points that I think apply to all businesses. Number 1, security is paramount. As you look to a purchase to pay solution, you are dealing with sensitive information. We're dealing with money. So you want to be sure you vet the companies that you're working with to make sure that they're at a bank level security. Number 2, there is a new era of employee. Guys like me, the baby boomers, we're in the minority right now, the workforce. I don't know all the terms for Generation X and Y and Z and on millennials and those types of things. But there's a new era of employee that's on board today that grew up in a completely digital world. They are going to question, why are we still pushing the paper? And they're going to push back when they say, well, that's just the way we've always done it. There's a newer era of employee that's just not going to think that way. So thirdly, and outsourced services are becoming a very common way of doing business. And this is a co-service. You're not just outsourcing your payments or your invoicing to companies like AvidXchange or TimberScan. You're taking their technology and their services and ultimately letting them do the heavy lifting, getting a lot of the mundane, the non-productive things out of the system with a new way of doing it, where you're using highest and best use of your people's times and the skills that they have. A key to the future with technology, and going back to what we said in the beginning, to be able to eke out those costs, simply stated, is to put you in a position to be able to grow your revenues at a steeper curve than you're growing your overhead. In other words, as your business grows, as we reopen the economy, as the demand for construction, that pent-up demand releases, you do not want to have to spend your way through it. There's too much risk in construction. You're always looking for a way to do risk transfer. And this is a good way of doing some risk transfer by transferring the risk of payment automation and helping with invoice routing and approval and compliance to these companies that can help you. But most importantly, being able to grow revenues at a much lesser rate than growing your overhead. And last but not least, coming full circle, we're certainly living in a digital age. And most businesses now, as we get back to work, are putting together a more robust business continuity plan that says next time something like this comes up, we're going to be more prepared. And if you're interested, we'd love to follow up with you and help you put that business continuity plan together for the future. So with that, I think we have one wrap-up poll question, and I want to thank you for your time today.
And thank you very much, Jim and Leanne. And my apologies for not properly introducing you both at the beginning. I have launched the final poll of this afternoon, or morning as applicable, and just wanted to see maybe if we had just a couple minutes. I had a couple questions in the chat that may be fairly easy to answer. If not, I will put out a list of all the questions with answers. And first one would be to Leanne with Core Associates, if you're able to, is the question was asked of how many approvals could you set up in TimberScan? So on an invoice, if you needed multi-layered approval, many people need to be involved. Is there a limit, or what would that amount be?
Sure. There's actually 10 levels of approval that you can set up within the system. And then, yeah, and they can be based on, like I said, individual routes or dollar threshold routes. So it's really flexible. I mean, we have over 2,000 customers, and we haven't run into a situation yet that we haven't been able to address in the software.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you very much. And that actually, I'm going through and believe I was able to answer the other questions. Sandy had asked, is there mobile applications both with TimberScan and Avid? And the answer is yes. I was able to answer that for them. I'll go through these again just to make sure afterwards, but I do thank everybody again, specifically Leanne with Core and Jim with AvidXchange, and do appreciate everybody's time and everybody attending today. Thank you so much for participating in our polls today. So again, we will follow up with you accordingly if you desired that in that last poll. If not, I do wish you a great day and a healthy and happy rest of your week. Thank you all.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Bye.